Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Everybody can find a seat, hopefully. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege to welcome you all in Den Haag to this political gathering. Today we are joined by representatives from all over the world. And I'm honored to extend a warm welcome to our guests that are here today, talking to us online or sending a video message. We have come together today because of our common concern and criticism of the increasing militarization of NATO. We believe it is essential to raise our voices and stand together for alternative vision, a vision based on de-escalation and dialogue. In particular, I would like to express my gratitude to Giuseppe Conte and the Five-Star Movement for their leadership in organizing this gathering. Their efforts have been crucial in bringing us together today. We are also especially honored to welcome a distinguished guest, Professor Jeffrey Sage, who will join us online. Sage has been a vocal critic of NATO's militarization and its undermining prospects for peace. Let this event serve as a powerful signal of unity and a space for political dialogue, cooperation, and a renewal call for peace. World leaders have gathered at the NATO summit to discuss how they are going to spend even more billions on war and militarization. But we should all be aware that there are many others, besides you and me, who have great concerns about this, but who often do not yet know how and in what way they can take action against it. Together, let us decide to contact and involve as much people as possible in our movement for peace. The urgency is growing day by day, because if world leaders and politicians continue to look away, we the people must stand up against genocide, against war, and against violence. At the NATO summit, government leaders will gather in this city to discuss a new NATO defense spending target, the so-called NATO norm. And I would like to call it the Trump norm. We should all call it the Trump norm. Because in less than 6 months, Trump called for a NATO norm of at least 5%. A day after, NATO Secretary General Rutte, our former president, copied this 5% standard, while casually adding that member states can reach this target by just cutting back spending on healthcare, education, and social security. And this week, Trump said that this wouldn't be held for the US itself. It shows the dominance of the US within NATO, an organization steeped into an ever-increasing expansion and a single-minded focus on further militarization. It is actually what former General US President Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell speech in 1961. He warned against the power of the military-industrial complex. As president, he had witnessed that the military-industrial complex is very committed to increasing military spending, committed to starting and provoking wars, committed to creating enemies or the illusion of enemies, and firmly committed to preventing peace negotiation with adversaries, that's a difficult word, that help demise. I've seen our former president talk in English. I think I can do better. The military-industrial complex, a powerful alliance between the military, armed companies, and the government agencies, Eisenhower said would lead to a money-grubbling arm race to which other interests are subordinated. This observation may seem familiar to you if you hear President Trump, NATO Secretary Rutte, and our government leaders talking. And I haven't been following every single media outlet in other countries, but I'm willing to bet the news columns and talk shows are filled with generals arguing for higher defense spending and legitimizing war, just like they do here in the Netherlands. And we need to talk with people about these powers at play. We need to talk about them on our schools, on our universities, on our workplaces, on the streets, in our neighborhoods. Thus, we see the interest of the military-industrial complex before us. We see politicians who serve their interest and exploit the fears and concerns of ordinary people out of political opportunism. We also see this pattern in the Netherlands. Neoliberals call for exorbitant increases in defense spending. In the Netherlands, defense spending has already doubled the past 4 years, from 11 to 22 billion euros per year. And now the neoliberals here are following the NATO norm of 5% imposed by Trump. This means another 30 to 40 billion euros each year in spending on military force. The neoliberals waste no time in seizing the moment to make even more cuts to our welfare state. And if you can be assured, they will use this moment to dictate further privatizations. Meanwhile, they continue to feed fear and uncertainty in our societies. This comes after decades of more individualism. Through insecurity and individualism, they have created a fertile ground of society to the seeds of hate, filled with the deception that other nations are our enemies and adversaries. Meanwhile, we know that any war these world leaders start, the fighting will be done by the working class on both sides of the battlefield. The bleeding will be done by the working class of both sides of the battlefield. The dying will be done by the working class of both sides of the battlefield. And yes, there also will be victory in some way. Victory for the profits of the military-industrial complex. Victory for the profits of hate and fear. Victory for the elites who will never send their own children to the front. We cannot let this happen. In many European countries, the discussion about militarization and the increase of militarization is now taking place. Suddenly, tens of billions in funding have been found in budgets. Meanwhile, there is never enough money for affordable housing. Meanwhile, there is never enough money for accessible healthcare. Meanwhile, there's never enough money for decent pensions. Meanwhile, there's never enough money for cheaper public transport. Meanwhile, there's never enough money for cleaner production and climate measures. Meanwhile, there's never enough money for the higher wages. Meanwhile, there's never enough money for free education. Meanwhile, there's never enough money for affordable food. So politicians who now commit to Trump's higher NATO norm show that they will never commit to solving people's problems. They are committed for years to austerity politics. They expose what interests they actually serve, those of Trump, Rutte, and the arm industry. It is this conflict between their and our interest that is central to the current time. The battle we have to fight is the battle between the interest of the few and the interest of the people. All over the world, we see movements that send a message of hope, and against the politics of war pursued by the radical right, such as Trump, Putin, Netanyahu, and Wilders. I've seen it last week here on the Malieveld in Den Hague, with 150,000 people demonstrating against the genocide in Gaza, but also in Brussels, in Quebec, and in the United States. All over the world, people don't want war, they want peace. Because if world leaders and politicians continue to look away, ordinary people must stand up against genocide, war, and militarization. I look forward to our efforts and solidarity in building this movement for peace and security together. As Mr. Conte already said, and I quote, because I like to quote that much, the core of the story is, without a public debate on a European and national level, we have been witnessing how in several weeks our European welfare model that we built up in decades is changed into a war machine. And we cannot let this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to everybody, all of you. I'm very glad, happy for this meeting, and also for the response to my public appeal. We are about 50, maybe more parties, political movements. We are here in order to say that there is an alternative solution to the only solution that our governments are offering to us within the European Union and within the NATO summit a few kilometers from here. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It is deeply moving to see so many people and voices from across Europe united by a shared vision in these uncertain times. One day, when our children will ask us, where were you when NATO was stealing our future? We can reply, we were in The Hague. One day when our children will ask, where were you when war started between Israel and Iran? We can reply, you were in The Hague, standing for peace. When they will ask to us, where were you when the Palestinian people were being massacred? We can reply, we were in The Hague, denouncing the genocide in Gaza. And by the way, let's applaud also the judges of the International Criminal Court who right here in The Hague are courageously upholding justice, defending international law, and confronting the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people by Israeli authorities. Our children can be proud of us. We are not supported by powerful multinationals, armed lobbies, or sympathetic media empires. What we have are our ideas, our convictions, and hope for a brighter, more peaceful future. And let's be clear, just a few kilometers from here, at the NATO headquarters, they are forging a future that threatens to destroy that hope. History has taught us this lesson. Has there ever been a military alliance that amassed weapons only to leave them unused? They claim it's in the name of security, but the result is quite the opposite. When states accumulate weapons in an attempt to protect themselves, other nations perceive a threat and respond by increasing their own military spending. This cycle of escalation forces growing insecurity, not safety. This is so-called the paradox of security. History has shown that when tensions spiral into a continuous exchange of threats, war is no longer just a distant possibility, it becomes a tragic reality. And in a world where nations have nuclear weapons, this is the risk we cannot take. If the proposal to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP is approved, the NATO member states in Europe alone would collectively allocate over 500 billion euros more per year, tripling current expenditures. This is political and economic suicide. We offer a different path: diplomacy, real security, and peace. It means the primacy of politics with its strategies, visions, solutions. I know exactly what it means to face a crisis. I was Prime Minister of Italy when the COVID-19 pandemic struck the world. Against this tragedy, Europe responded with bold economic and social investments to protect families and business, ensuring a recovery built on solidarity. Today, in the face of growing global instability, Europe is taking a far riskier path, a fragmented rearmament strategy handed over to the discretion of individual member states. This is not European defense. It is its undoing. We say no to the rearmament plan proposed by Ursula von der Leyen. We say no to the diverting cohesion funds toward defense, and we say no to the proposal to invest what remains of the next generation EU into military spending. And I'm glad also to announce that just a few hours ago, Commissioner Juri of the European Parliament approved the decision to appeal before the European Court of Justice the plan of REARM. This is the first victory of this movement. This is the first victory of all of us, and this is the first victory of our democracy. We say no to the militarization of Europe's economy. We think that the priority of our citizens is not to invest in arms. We say yes to the peace. We say yes to diplomacy. We say yes to shared prosperity and social investment. We say yes to politics with capital P. And so to conclude, when our children one day will ask us, what did you do to prevent the Third World War? We can reply, I did everything. I never gave up. Thank you.
Queridas compañeras y compañeros, en Europa se está abriendo un debate crucial, un debate sobre el papel que queremos.
To introduce Yolanda Diaz. She's Minister of Labour, and she's campaigning for the alternative vision of Europe in this moment, being in a government position. She's Vice Premier in Spain. Yolanda Diaz sent us a contribution. Yesterday was very busy with this government and with this campaign against as well the war and the attack and the genocide in Gaza.
Queridas compañeras y compañeros, en Europa se está abriendo un debate crucial, un debate sobre el papel que queremos que juegue nuestro continente en un mundo atravesado por la incertidumbre, la desigualdad y la crisis ecológica, y sobre qué modelo de sociedad estamos dispuestas a defender. Además, este debate se da en tiempos muy difíciles. Tiempos marcados por el avance de la extrema derecha, por el poder sin control de los gigantes tecnológicos, por la guerra, por la desigualdad y sobre todo por un genocidio que está siendo retransmitido en directo frente a una comunidad internacional que mira hacia otro lado. Y frente a esa realidad, la respuesta que propone la Comisión Europea en sintonía con la OTAN es más gasto militar, más dependencia del complejo industrial de defensa de Estados Unidos, más armas. Ya conocemos bien cuál es el espíritu que guía a Estados Unidos. Lo ha demostrado el señor Trump con su nueva versión imperialista, pero ya lo vimos en tiempos anteriores. Da igual quién gobierne en Norteamérica, siempre tienen la misma política de guerra. El plan de la Comisión Europea pone en riesgo la concepción original de Europa. Europa no nació para eso. Europa no es eso. Europa es una promesa de paz, de libertad, de derechos humanos, una promesa que nació tras la barbarie y que solo puede sostenerse si defendemos los valores que la hicieron posible. Transformar esa promesa en una carrera armamentística es un grave error, un error profundo, y España no puede formar parte de él. Nuestro país tiene que liderar la apertura de un nuevo camino. España tiene que adherirse al Grupo de La Haya. Tenemos que asistir a la reunión de Bogotá para afirmar que no estamos ante indicios de que Israel viole los derechos humanos, sino ante pruebas evidentes de que Netanyahu está cometiendo un genocidio. La paz no se alcanza con más armas. Europa ya destina más de 374.000 millones de euros a defensa, 3 veces más que Rusia. Y sin embargo, no hay una política de defensa común ni una estrategia compartida. Lo que hay es descoordinación, dependencia, generamos miedo. Porque no se trata de gastar más, se trata de construir otra seguridad, de coordinarnos mejor, de defendernos mejor. Necesitamos una seguridad que no pase por la militarización, sino por la autonomía energética, por la reindustrialización verde, por el refuerzo de los servicios públicos y por una política exterior europea que apueste por la diplomacia y el derecho internacional. Una seguridad que mire de frente a los grandes desafíos de nuestro tiempo: el cambio climático, la desigualdad creciente, el agotamiento del modelo económico, y que ponga la vida y la paz siempre en el centro. Necesitamos una Europa que defienda la paz y el multilateralismo en el marco de las Naciones Unidas, que defienda siempre a los pueblos que luchan por su dignidad. Una Europa que no mire hacia otro lado ante el genocidio que se está cometiendo en Palestina. Desde las instituciones y también desde las calles vamos a seguir empujando por una Europa más justa, más libre, más social y más democrática, por una Europa que esté siempre del lado de la vida. Gracias por seguir caminando juntas. Seguimos.
Again, thank you very much for coming. And we've put together a statement on paper for all political parties and organization in this room to sign. But it would be nice if Mr. Kanter would sign first, and then I will follow. And the statement will be given to the press afterwards. So Giuseppe would like you to sign it first, please. First and then all together. Maybe all the political parties could join us.
We can combine.
We can combine, yes.
All together here. Ready?
We have only one pen. We share. Yeah.
Applause. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to everybody. And now we have a very influential voice, a voice of peace, we call it. Several times has been always with us, with the 5-Star Movement since we started this protest already in Rome on 5 of April 2025. It was a big demonstration with more than 100,000 people. And then we repeated it on 7 of June with more than 300,000 people asking peace and asking a different approach against the conflict. Today is with us Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs has been an influential economist around the world, has been an advocate for peace, and not only. He is an advocate of social justice. He wrote several books on sustainability, on eradicating poverty. And you are working on that, you all know. So, Jeffrey, I know that you are connected right now. You have jet lag. I mean, you have different time right now. It is very early, maybe, where you are in States. Okay, so there is a technical issue. I'm really sorry for the live issue occurring. So then I will move to James Galbraith. Actually, Galbraith and Sachs are a couple in a sense of the voice of peace. James Galbraith has been strongly advocating for a different approach around the world and strongly defending peace and dialogue in international relations. As being an economist working extensively on inequality. And today I will show his message to all of you.
Greetings, friends and participants in the European Parliament Peace Summit. Let me commend the spirit of your exercise without having revealed the details of what you may propose. I will just offer a few words as a longtime participant in movements for peace and against war, and in my family going back multiple generations. Peace is a difficult business. Each and every charlatan claims to pursue it. Empty slogans, peace through strength, peace by armament, peace is our profession, are uttered by every shallow politician and every lobbyist for the weapons trade. Real peace, lasting peace, secure peace, requires mutual respect, respect for the interests of all the parties who may be concerned, and trustworthy leadership. This we lack. I hope your efforts will focus in Europe on that problem. It's not the only challenge on the path to peace, but it is an indispensable prerequisite if progress is ever to be made. The best of luck with your meeting. Thank you.
Now our program will continue with a letter of Barbara Spinelli. Barbara Spinelli has been a former member of parliament and another voice of peace. His letter will be read by Laura Ferrara, who is the coordinator of International Affairs Committee of the 5-Star Movement. Laura, please.
The Counter Summit for Peace and Justice held in The Hague stands as a strong statement against the European Union's rearmament process, which is being pushed under NATO guidance and heavily influenced by the United States. A special thank to Italy's 5-Star Movement and Giuseppe Conte, the only voices in the Italian parties calling for resistance to this path, one that is unfolding without any democratic consultation of European citizens. The dominant narrative claims EU rearmament as a direct reaction to Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2023. This view deliberately ignores the deeper geopolitical and historical causes of the conflict, which are rooted in NATO's post-Cold War eastward expansion. This expansion, carried out with little regard for Russia's strategic concerns, has been perceived in Moscow as a serious threat comparable to the hypothetical stationing of Russian or Chinese military bases on America's borders. The real turning point occurred in the 1990s. Instead of building a new cooperative European security order following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States and its allies acted as a victorious powers. NATO was preserved rather than dismantled and repurposed as a tool for global interventionism. Its involvement in regime change wars in the Balkans, the Middle East, and beyond has largely failed, but the strategy persists. During this time, the US increased its military footprint globally, maintaining over 750 military bases in at least 80 countries. Europe followed this unilateralist and hegemonic strategy with little resistance. One of its gravest mistakes was expanding both the EU and NATO into Eastern Europe simultaneously, without clearly distinguishing between the political and military implications. As a result, Europe has become inseparable from NATO, forming what is now commonly referred to in Brussels as the Euro-Atlantic community. The war in Ukraine stems from the West's failure to acknowledge Russia's long-standing demands for Ukrainian neutrality and its opposition to NATO membership for Kyiv. Rather than being a bid for conquest, Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine was seen by Moscow as a last resort to force negotiation on issues ignored for nearly 2 decades. This perspective is systematically excluded from Western discourse, which instead paints the conflict in purely moral or ideological terms, fueling a growing Russophobia, particularly within EU leadership. Back in 1990, a viable and peaceful alternative was proposed by Gorbachev, the idea of a common European home, a security framework inclusive of Russia and attentive to the growing divergence between European and American geopolitical interests. This vision, grounded in mutual respect and post-national cooperation, was soon abandoned as NATO expanded eastward. Gorbachev's vision still aligns more closely with the aspiration of European citizens, many of whom desire peace and social welfare over militarization. The original idea behind Europe unity was to overcome centuries of nationalist conflicts through a shared commitment to democracy, solidarity, and social justice. This aspiration gave rise to Europe's welfare systems shaped by anti-fascist values, not American influence. The speech denounces recent pro-war rhetoric from European leaders. A chilling example is cited from German politician Friedrich Merz, who praised Israel for doing the dirty work for all of us following the war in Iran and ahead of US bombings. I fully respect Israel. That showed to be really brave, said Merz. And Merz also pledged to make Germany's military the most powerful in Europe and raise defense spending to 5% of GDP. Such statements ignore Germany's historical responsibility and the memory of the 27 million Soviets who died in the World War II. The German Social Democrats governing alongside Merz are condemned for their silence and complicity. Also very bad the declaration made by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who called NATO the most powerful defense alliance in world history, more powerful than the Roman Empire or Napoleon's empire, and declared the goal of making NATO more lethal. The 5% defense spending target is interpreted not as a protection, but as an investment in deadly war machine. NATO, once presented as defensive, is now openly offensive. Kaja Kallas, when she was Prime Minister of Estonia, reportedly claimed that the goal of the Ukraine conflict was to dismantle Russia through a proxy war. And this objective, never retracted, is viewed as a part of a broader Western strategy to break apart powers central to the emerging multipolar world order. What is happening is not a matter of European defense, as claimed by NATO and the EU institutions. True common defense would require a European army answerable to a sovereign European state, something that does not exist. What we see instead is a push to purchase American weapons and participate in US-led wars, far removed from Europe's core interests. Ultimately, I'd like to warn of dangerous consequences. Fear becoming the next targets of Western regime change wars may be driven to acquire nuclear weapons, not out of aggression, but for deterrence and survival. Many of these countries had no interest in going nuclear, but maybe feel they have no other choice if they are to protect themselves from being dismantled.
I'm very glad now to introduce a leader of a party, Greek party, a Course of Freedom, Zo Konstantopoulou. Zo, thank you very much for joining. You are leading a struggle, very important struggle in Greece on many issues that we are addressing here today. And when Zo responded to my appeal, you said what? I'm very afraid because one day my children can ask to me where you were on June 24th. So you can reply, you were here. We were together. The floor to you.
Thank you so much, Giuseppe, and thank you all. It is really a pleasure It won't resist. It is a pleasure to be here, and I want to congratulate you, Giuseppe, for this excellent initiative, which lives up to our obligations, our duties, and to the expectations of the children of the world and of the societies in the world. Dear friends, dear colleagues, dear all, our presence here today is of symbolic but also of historic value. At a time where state governments show a gross lack of leadership, a gross lack of responsibility, a lack of empathy, a lack of accountability, and the mere ability to represent the peoples of the world and to listen to their voices, echo their hopes and aspirations, at a time where civil societies step up and step forward to claim their rights, to claim their lives, to claim their dignity, but also to claim peace and prosperity for all civilians, for all human beings, and to show solidarity to the victims and to the oppressed, to respect and show respect to all living beings and to the planet, at a time where students around the world unite to oppose the war and all related international crimes against civilian populations, against culture, against the environment, against humanity as a whole, at a time where artists and intellectuals step forward to oppose crimes against children, against women, against men, against the elderly, to oppose putting economic and geopolitical calculations above human lives, at a time where social movements and activists around the world take matters into their own hands and risk their lives to save humanity, to save our common dignity, and carry the burden of our common responsibility as human beings, at this very time, we are also stepping up and taking a step forward here in The Hague, a place symbolizing justice and peace. And we are taking a step together to say no to war, to say no to rearmaments, no to the astronomical budget increases for defense expenditures, to say no to hate, no to racism, no to discriminations, no to apartheid, no to genocide perpetrated at this very moment against the Palestinian people, no to the dehumanization of the victims, no to war crimes, no to crimes against humanity, no to acts of aggression and wars of aggression, no to famine, no to colonialism, no to imperialism, no to oppression, no to occupation. And we should remember that there is a member state of the European Union which is still occupied, militarily occupied, for 51 years now. I'm talking about Cyprus. No. We're here to say no to extermination, no to pushbacks of desperate people seeking refuge. And we say yes to peace, yes to international justice, yes to accountability of those in power, no matter how high in power, no matter how powerful. We say yes to transparency over all public expenditures, including the so-called defense expenditures, which have nothing to do with defense, as we all know. We say yes to democracy and to the sovereign democratic rights of all peoples to refrain from war and to be protected from war and to live and to prosper in peace. I come from a country, Greece, with a glorious history. It's a small country, you all know it, and it has a glorious history of resistance to the Nazi occupation and the Nazi oppression. Our people, the Greek people, resisted in a heroic way and paid a heavy price for resisting, resulting to 1.5 million dead and wounded, amounting to 20% of Greece's population. Greece is tainted with hundreds of places of massacres and executions by the Nazi oppressors. Humanity is tainted with the trauma of the Holocaust against the Jews, but also against the Roma, against homosexuals, against Black people. After the Second World War, humanity said, never again war, never again genocide, never again crimes against humanity, never again war crimes. This was the basis for creating the United Nations. It was also the basis for creating the European communities, which led to the EU. It was the basis for creating the International Court of Justice seated here in The Hague. It was the basis for creating the International Criminal Court seated here in The Hague. This is our common identity. This is our common heritage, and it has to be, we have to strive for it to be our common legacy. Peace requires accountability. There is no peace without justice. And there can be no peace so long as international criminals continue to reign in impunity and continue to be received as friends by European leaders who should arrest them. On the 23rd of October 2023, the Prime Minister of Greece, Mr. Mitsotakis, visited Israel for 1 hour. In front of the cameras, he hugged Benjamin Netanyahu and said to him, "I come not just as an ally, but as a true friend." And then he said, "Whatever happens, happens without too much of a humanitarian cost." What is this, if not encouragement to commit international crimes? What is this, if not complicity, coaction in international crimes? It is these criminals that victimize other peoples, but they also victimize their own people. The peoples of the world do not seek war. The mothers of the world do not want to see their children in coffins, and they do not want to see any children in coffins. The armaments policies around the world are in gross distance with the people's sentiment, with the people's will, and in contradiction with the people's interests. And no government and no international organization such as the EU have the right to launch armament rallies against the will, against the sentiment, and against the interests of its people. To this effect, I will share with you a small but big finding. Back in 2015, I was the President of Parliament for Greece at a time where Greece was being suffocated and really blackmailed with the use of public debt. At that point, I instituted a committee, the Truth Committee on Public Debt, which made an audit of Greece's debt. And the preliminary report of this committee, it's this booklet that my colleagues are now handing out to you. The preliminary report, the first preliminary report, which was issued just 10 years ago on the 17th and 18th of June 2015 by a committee comprised by professionals, by scientists, by lawyers, but also activists, citizens, found that a big part of Greece's debt had to do with defense expenditures, so-called defense expenditures, which were all related to corruption. Because defense expenditures around the world are related to corrupt deals. And when we talk about no to REARM and no to war, we should also keep in mind that we are saying no to corruption-related deals, baptized as defense deals. This is the report. And as our party is receiving a lot more trust by the people, we're now the 8th party in the parliament, but we're 2nd in the polls. I'm currently the only woman head of a political party in the Greek parliament. As our party is receiving more trust by the people, I'm beginning to think that at some point we will discuss policies of auditing and writing off odious, illegitimate, illegal, and unsustainable debts related to this kind of deals. At this moment, where a genocide is being perpetrated before our own eyes, projected and live streamed on everyone's cell phone, the question is relentless. Giuseppe asked it, everyone asks it, children will ask it. What did you do? Our response has to be firm. We did, and we continue to do everything we can to stop the war, to protect the victims, to heal the wounded, to bring lasting peace. Our response has to be, we will not tolerate anything less than peace and justice, and we will not stop until we bring it to the world. A lot of discussion is going on about the right side of history. And on the one hand, you have initiatives like the Freedom Flotilla with 12 activists, of which 10 European citizens. You have March to Gaza with thousands of activists and a lot of European people. And on the other side, you have the so-called world leaders who pretend to play chess with people's destinies and people's lives. On the one hand, you have Greta Thunberg, Rima Hassan, young women, or as Trump said, young, angry women who need anger management seminars. That was his saying. And on the other hand, you have Trump. I choose the young, angry women of the world. I, like Greta Thunberg, believe we need a lot more young, angry women in the world, and young, angry men, and young and less young or more young people, because young is at heart, who believe in humanity, who believe in our right to peace. We want to be proud of ourselves, and we want to be proud of ourselves in the same way that we're proud of the people who resisted the Nazis 85 years ago. And to conclude, I always think, and I'm always moved by the speech of our colleague Giuseppe, the lawyers who represented South Africa before the ICJ in its claim for genocide to be found, to be perpetrated by Israel. So our lawyer colleague said something which I believe touches us all. We're at the point where the Palestinian people, the Palestinian children, the Palestinian victims, but also the victims, the children, the people of the world are waiting for the world to do something. And as they are waiting, we should remind ourselves that we are the world. We must do something, and we will do something. We will do everything for peace and justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this great talk. And we were with Greece at that time during this very difficult time. Now it's time finally for Jeffrey Sachs. I announced it before, but there was some problem. Jeffrey, now you are here. I introduced you before. All of members here and guests know who you are, because your advocacy in the world has been so strong. And thank you very much for being a friend, of us. You have been several times with us. Now, I would like to ask you, given this, the industrialization in Europe, which is going on, it is facing a crisis, and the challenge that we pose to our welfare system. We have been working extensively on sustainability, on eradicating poverty. The decision of Europe and of NATO today to increase public expenditure for defense to 5% of GDP is the right answer to this moment? Please, we listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, and wonderful to be with you and be with friends. I'm sitting in Dag Hammarskjöld Park, which some of you will know, just across the street from the United Nations. So I think it's fitting. And I want to add one word to our discussion, and that is diplomacy. What's really missing in the world right now, and missing in Europe in particular, is not 2 or 3 percentage points of GDP for military spending. It is diplomacy. Europe stopped having any diplomats. European diplomats, so-called, are the biggest warmongers. European diplomats talk about, I don't know, hate or how we need to increase the war effort, but they don't sit down with any counterparts in any way that is honest. It's a lot cheaper, to be honest, than to spend 5% of GDP on the military. And 5% of GDP will put you to war, by the way. When you build your military, you will go to war. These people like to play with their toys. As your military builds, you'll fight. You will be destroyed. Sorry. This is absurd. You don't need extra money on the military. What you need is diplomacy. Let me make just a couple of examples. Israel attacks Iran, and all the European diplomats criticize Iran. Last week was shambolic. I was at the United Nations Security Council, and this was supposedly after an absolutely illegal, unprovoked, dangerous attack by Israel against Iran 3 days before what was supposed to be the 6th round of diplomacy. The Danish ambassador couldn't even utter the words that Israel had attacked. The whole speech was attacking Iran. This is not diplomacy. This is stupidity, frankly. This is just lying. And we saw this all last week because I don't know what it is. I'm sorry to say it. I love Europe more than my country, but I can't see any sense right now among the leaders. Rutte, give me a break. Merz, oh my God, you're going to war again. This is great news. Rearm Germany. Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Are you kidding? What are people thinking? So actually, you know, if you step back in these wars, just a little bit of honesty, a little bit of understanding two sides of an issue could get us to peace a lot faster than 5% of GDP in the military. I've been involved with the Russia-Ukraine issues for 35 years. I was advisor to Gorbachev. I was an advisor to Yeltsin. I was an advisor to Kuchma. I've advised both sides. You know what? We cheated Russia. Russia wanted peace, but we needed NATO enlargement. Ask Mr. Rutte about that. I know, I was there. We promised no NATO enlargement. That's not a myth, that's a reality. I know about the Bucharest summit in 2008 because European leaders called me. I could name names that would be embarrassing, and I won't. But European leaders called me and said, what is your president doing pushing for NATO enlargement to Ukraine and to Georgia? Because they knew how reckless it is. I happened to be on the Maidan soon after the coup because I was asked by the new Ukrainian government to come. And people explained to me how the Western, I can't go into complete detail. The United States paid for the Maidan. The United States conspired in a violent coup. Do you know that? Of course. They even intercepted the phone call of my colleague, Victoria Nuland. She's my colleague at Columbia now. She was the point person for the coup. It's called the CIA, if anyone wants to know the details. I can give you more information. After there's a coup, there's going to be a war because we overthrew a neutral government. Why did we do that? Because we wanted to expand NATO. That was the US plan. Then came Minsk II. Minsk II was modeled after South Tyrol, by the way. Minsk II was modeled after Belgium. Minsk II was modeled after the idea of autonomy for local regions. Mrs. Merkel knew all about it because she knows all about South Tyrol. Then the United States said, don't honor Minsk II. You know that. There could have been peace in 2015. There could have been peace in 2016. Then in 2021, again, Putin put on the table to Biden, don't expand your missile systems and NATO to Ukraine. You know what the White House answer was? It's none of your business. And then when the war broke out, within 6 weeks, there was a peace agreement. You can look it up. April 15, 2022, it's called the Istanbul process. Even the New York Times published the nearly completed document. What happened? You know, the United States and Boris Johnson intervened with Zelensky to say, don't sign that. Fight on. We'll defeat the Russians. And now they're telling you 5% of GDP for the military, rather than telling you the truth, that peace could have been reached for 25 years. I watched it every step of the way. I've been in the room much of the time. You don't need 5% of GDP, Taurus missiles, and all the rest. You need diplomacy. Now, remember when Mrs. Callas called Lavrov? Do you remember that? No, you don't, because she never has. You have the European High Representative diplomat who has never spoken to her Russian counterpart since she's come into office. You have Chancellor of Germany, I don't want to say more, of Germany coming to office and talking only about war, not calling his counterpart, President Putin, who said a couple of days ago, of course I'd welcome a call, but I never received even a suggestion of a call. So you're being put on, you're being put up to this. And when it comes to the Middle East, of course, it's completely shambolic. For 30 years, Netanyahu has had a plan, which is we control everything in Palestine, and if anyone objects, we overthrow their government. It's called Clean Break. You can look up the document. You can read his books. You can listen to his speeches. He's been the biggest warmonger in the world in the last 30 years, even outdoing the United States, because he led the United States into all these wars in Iraq, in Syria, and Libya. These are Israel's wars, all because of the theory, we will crush the Palestinian cause, and if anyone doesn't like it, we'll crush them, because we have the US on our side. Now, I know Europeans know a lot better than that, but the leaders are afraid. They don't say a word. And I just went through, as I said, a Security Council session that was completely surrealistic. Israel attacks, and every European representative attacks Iran, not Israel. You can't get an honest word in this. And Macron, by the way, was supposed to co-host a high-level session on Palestine on implementing the two-state solution. And the way you implement the two-state solution is you recognize the state of Palestine. But the United States told him, don't do it. And so the session was postponed. This is Europe. So let me just make the most basic points. Europe is 450 million people, the United States, 335 million people. Europe lives with these problems on your own neighborhood. The United States plays games. The United States spends less as a share of GDP than it's telling Europe to spend. And the United States is the biggest warmongering country in modern history. And Europe gave up on diplomacy. The biggest mistake of Europe was to put the headquarters of NATO and the headquarters of the EU in the same city. Shame. They're completely different. One should be ended, that is NATO. There's no reason for it. And the other should become stronger and more effective and more honest and more diplomatic. But it doesn't need to spend what it doesn't have, which is money needed for human well-being. I'm, by the way, on my way in a few days to Sevilla, to the Global Summit on Financing for Development. And you know what? First of all, the United States pulled out of it altogether because it says we don't care about financing for development. Literally, it says we don't believe in the Sustainable Development Goals. That's your ally. The one that pulled out of the Paris Agreement, that's your ally. And then what is Europe doing at this summit? Europe is saying, well, there's no money. We have to cut aid. You have to live within your budgets. Why? So that you can raise GDP to 5% of GDP. They have raised military to 5% of GDP. My main point, though, and I'll stop here, and I'm sorry to rant, my main point is very simple. Europe will not be safe and will not be made safe by higher military spending. Europe can be made safe by diplomacy. That's the basic point. You're living the insecurity of no diplomacy.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the chance to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much, Jeff. And now I'm glad and honored to welcome Fabio De Masi. Fabio De Masi is a good friend of us. He's the head of delegation of BSV party in the European Parliament. We appreciate very much your deep commitment to economic, social issues that we are discussing today all together in a perspective of a common vision. And of course, I appreciate also the Italian roots of Fabio. Fabio, the floor is yours.
Is it working? Yeah. Dear friends, I'm honored to be here on the initiative of Giuseppe Conte, under the great hospitality of our friends from the Socialist Party of the Netherlands. And I have a very special duty to be here today because I'm the grandson of an Italian resistance fighter during the Second World War and a German soldier. And I wouldn't be here if Europe would not have been able to end the unspeakable war crimes that my country, Germany, has brought over Europe, and it was built on the ashes of these crimes. International law has been built on the ashes of these crimes. My grandfather, my Italian grandfather, didn't have a choice but to take up weapons to defend his country. But we do have a chance today, and let there be no doubt, the forces that have gathered here today will defend the thirst of Europeans for peace, for diplomacy, and for shared prosperity. And while we're discussing to invest 5% of our GDP into armament, the European Parliament has just recently voted in its majority against the proposal of the Development Committee to tax the richest 3,000 oligarchs and billionaires in this world with a modest tax on the accumulated wealth, as has been suggested by renowned economists like Gabriel Zucman, which has been taken up under the umbrella of the G20. And while we're having these priorities, we should not wonder why we have lunatics like Donald Trump ruling the most powerful country on earth, while we've seen the rise of the far-right parties even in Europe. because we have witnessed after the economic and financial crisis how the wars, first in Iraq, in Afghanistan, later the internationalized conflicts in Syria, in Libya, have contributed, for example, to the refugee crisis, which has greatly assisted the far right in Europe to take power. And now we are witnessing again great errors being conducted on the battlefields of Europe. Let there be no doubt. The Russian invasion in Ukraine is a clear breach of international law. But I'm convinced this war could have been prevented. We have rejected calls from Russia previously to speak about the neutrality of Ukraine. Where are we now? 1 million dead and wounded people later. We will probably see the neutrality of Ukraine, but Ukraine has lost 20% of its territory. We have a country where only the old and wounded have remained, while hundreds of thousands of young Ukrainians have left the country. And at the same time, we have exposed the double standards of European leaders in the genocide committed in Gaza. We have exposed the double standards and the complete destruction of international law by European leaders not condemning the attack on Iran. And we have lost our moral integrity in the eyes of the world. Europe plays no diplomatic nor political role in international conflicts. And we are a continent which is nestled between the East and the West. Our strength, our economic interest, our political interest is to be a mediating force between the West and the East. We have decided sanction package after sanction package, hurting our own economies while not really making this war shorter. And so we need new diplomatic initiatives. Now we're being told that we can only create safety by spending more on armament. But what does it mean to spend 5% of GDP? In terms of Germany, it means every second euro from the federal budget only going into the military-industrial complex. And I can promise you that Pasquale and I will be busy in the next years in some inquiry committee in the European Parliament investigating the corruption and the mismanagement of funds feeding the pockets and the profits of the arms industry. I can already promise you now. Because we shouldn't forget that the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has only become the leader of Europe because she stumbled over a big scandal of procurement in the German army. The German expenditure on military was already as large as the expenditure of France prior to the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. Now we have invested 100 billion euros more, and now we're even told to invest 5% of our GDP, and it will undermine the productive capacity of our economies. It will lead Europe to lose out in the race for new technologies that better the lives of our citizens. For years, Germany has lectured other countries such as Greece, and we fought these battles together, not to invest in its civil infrastructure, not to invest in the health system, not to invest in schools and universities, to lower pension and wages of our citizens. And now we're being told that we are threatened by Russia, and this would be the reason we would need to make this effort. But truth being told, 10 years ago, I remember that the former Commissioner Katainen already spoke in the European Parliament about reforming the European debt rules to the effect of exempting only military investment from these debt rules 10 years ago. So the European Union misuses crisis in the world to push for an agenda that was already there before Russia even invaded Ukraine. And the reason they're pushing for this is because Europe is still living under the illusion to be able to become a global military player, being actively involved everywhere, whether it be in Northern Africa or some other areas of the world. But Europe had its most glorious moments when we were a force of diplomacy and true safety for our citizens can only be attained by binding arms control treaties, by disarmament. Because we know that we already spend so much more than Russia in the European NATO states, even when we take out the United States, than Russia. The United States has 27 large-scale weapon systems. Europe has 89. So we don't even have a basic kind of efficiency in our own procurement sector. And if we now put more money into that black hole, we will only bid up prices, we will only fill the pockets of the military-industrial complex while further undermining the productive capacity of our economies. And this is why we're saying true safety can be only attained by having mutual security assurance, trust-building measures, arms control. Russia has 5,000 nuclear spearheads. France has 300 and the UK roughly the same amount. So what is the solution? If we build more tanks, will we do away with this asymmetry? Or are we supposed to build 4,000 nuclear warheads? We were never so close in the world again to a hot nuclear war. So it is our duty to stand up against these policies. We want more civil investment, more economic prosperity, a return to diplomacy, a return to Europe that plays again its role at the negotiating table and that defends our very own economic interests. We are not the puppy of the United States. We have to fulfill our own needs. We have to serve our own citizens, and that's what we will do together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fabio. Thank you. And now allow me to go a little bit again to the video. It is really a pleasure for me to introduce a message from Corbyn. Corbyn has been a former leader of Labour Party in Britain, has been a voice of peace, has been a voice of social justice, a voice defending human rights. Please.
I'm delighted to join the Counter NATO Summit, but unfortunately I can't be there physically. I have to be in London because we have important statements in Parliament concerning the bombing of Iran, and we also have very large demonstrations of protest as well, which I, of course, will be attending. And so I just want to send you this message. The NATO summit this week is going to be faced with proposals to rapidly and greatly increase defense expenditure beyond the level it is at the moment. Last year, global arms spending reached $2.7 trillion. This year could reach $3 trillion. That's money being spent on armaments, on military, and at the same time building up a new Cold War with China and with Russia, and of course the bombing of Iran that's happened over the last weekend. And so really the world is faced with two paths. Are we going to go down the road of increasing arms expenditure all over the world and the effects that has on national budgets? Or are we instead going to go to the other path of properly funding peace organizations like the United Nations, of demanding ceasefires in the wars that are going on, of demanding peace and justice? Or are we going to do the wrong one? If we go down the road of peace and justice, there's more resources available for social justice, there's more resources available for environmental sustainability, and there's more resources available to deal with the issue of the large numbers of people who are refugees, who are victims of war and human rights abuse. My solidarity with all of you today. The demands you're making for peace around the world, the demands you're making for a planet worthy of the next generation. Because if we don't stand up now and be a big, loud, united voice for peace and social justice, then nobody else will. So let's unite around the world, in our thousands, in our millions, to bring about peace and justice. Thank you for inviting me to give you this message. I'm only sorry I can't be physically there with you, but you know what? There's going to be lots of occasions when we're going to meet physically, because we are not disappearing. Our voice is getting bigger, stronger, and louder.
Thank you. Thank you. The international of peace is much bigger than what we believe. And now, the message from Michael McNamara. McNamara is an Irish politician, independent, in Ireland, attached to the Renew, to the Liberal Party at the Parliament, and is a voice of peace. Please send a message.
We were called pigs. Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece and Spain couldn't borrow for essential needs, essential infrastructure for the state, still struggle to fund the essential infrastructure that we need for our energy networks. But there was no possibility of mutualization of debt, no possibility of Eurobonds. And now suddenly, because we need to buy German tanks, Eurobonds are being plucked out of the air and everything is fine. I am Irish, I'm an MEP for Ireland South, and I have very little interest in NATO as long as Ireland remains outside. What NATO does is a matter for NATO and NATO members. It's not something that interests me until it starts to subvert the European Union, of which Ireland is a member state. The fact that Eurobonds are being issued specifically to fund defence spending because NATO is calling for increased spending on defence shows that the European Union is being subverted by NATO, and then it becomes a concern for me. Then I oppose it, and then I support those who are organising in The Hague to show that there is another Europe, a better Europe, a Europe that looks after its citizens, not its military industrial complex, one which will, I believe, bring us to ruin rather than prosperity. We need to invest in energy, we need to invest in bridging the digital gap that now exists with both China and with the United States. But instead of doing that, we're issuing defence bonds which would benefit only the defence industry in a small group of member states.
And now I'm pleased to give the floor to João Oliveira. João Oliveira. João Oliveira is a member of the European Parliament for Portugal, representative of PCP party, and is also, and we appreciate very much for this, is also a dedicated advocate for social justice, for peace, for the rights of workers. The floor to you.
Good afternoon to you all. First of all, I would like to thank the invitation to be part of this important initiative. And I hope that after such good and important speeches we are already here today, I hope it's not a big disappointment from your part what I have to say to you. No rearm, no war. It's a clear statement towards an alternative of peace, cooperation, and social justice that opposes to militarization, confrontation, and war. The mobilization of peoples for peace must be a reference for the convergent action of progressive and democratic forces, and is of the utmost importance considering the dangers humankind is facing right now. The international situation has seen dangerous developments with the escalation of confrontation and war, the promotion and advancement of reactionary and fascist conceptions, projects and forces, the worsening international tensions, and the growing threats of a global conflict of catastrophic proportions. The strategy with which the United States seeks to maintain its hegemony represents the most serious threat to peace in the world. NATO is the most dangerous instrument of this aggressive offensive under the direction of the US. The European Union maintains its alignment with the US and NATO strategy, increases militarism, and takes steps towards its transformation into a new political military bloc complementary to NATO, at the expense of peace, the rights and living conditions of workers and peoples. War is not an accident, of course. It is the attempt planned by the big corporations of the main capitalist powers to get out of their own crisis, assumed and put into action by the political power that gives expression to their interests. The consequences of war are imposed to workers and peoples with death and destruction of living conditions. The genocide of the Palestinian people, Israel's escalation of war in the Middle East, now also with US support and direct participation in the aggression against Iran, the conflict in Ukraine, or the militarization of the Asia-Pacific region are 4 examples that confirm the serious danger that the escalation of confrontation and war poses to the future of humankind. It's urgent to stop this path to the abyss. It's urgent to stop and defeat the policy of confrontation and war. The way forward is that of the struggle for peace, for general, simultaneous, and controlled disarmament, for the rights of peoples, for equality between states, for the peaceful solution of international conflicts, for non-interference and for in the internal affairs of the other states, and for cooperation between peoples for the emancipation and progress of humankind. The way forward is the fight against the militarization of the EU, the dissolution of NATO, and the creation of a collective security system. We must stop the diversion of resources to militarism and the arms race. Increasing military spending will only bring us increased dangers and risk of war. Scientific, technological, and productive capacities, as well as economic and financial resources, must be directed towards improving living and working conditions and responding to the economic and social problems that afflict the lives of peoples. The development of people's struggle for peace is indispensable. This popular mobilization cannot be separated from a path of defense of rights, sovereignty, and democracy in its political, economical, social, and cultural dimensions. A path of transformation in a progressive sense that allows overcoming the contradictions of the international situation in correspondence to the aspirations and desires of workers and peoples. The convergence of diverse forces on a broad front that halts and pushes back the forces of war, social regression, and fascism, and opens the way to a new international order of peace based on the principles of the United Nations Charter and the final act of the Helsinki Conference, it's absolutely indispensable. No rearm, no war is a clear statement to take this path. The Portuguese communists will stand firm and committed with this goal. This is the answer we want to give to our children and grandchildren when they ask us, where were you when the world was falling into the abyss of war? Here we stand firm, standing for peace.
Thank you, Joao. Thank you very much. And now I want to give you the message of an international journalist, Rula Jabrel. Rula has been advocating human rights, intercultural exchange, and defending Palestinian free to live in peace. He's an international journalist born and raised in Palestine, in Haifa, and in Jerusalem. The message, please.
My name is Rula Jabril, and I'm a Palestinian journalist and author. And I am so sorry not to be with you physically to protest the NATO summit, the whole idea of rearming, and as only solution to the madness that is being unleashed in Palestine, in Gaza, and beyond. Immediately after the declaration of the ceasefire, the Minister of Finance of Israel, Smotrich, declared it's not now our priority is to complete the job. Completing the job means extermination of Palestinians, of the 2 million Palestinian plus that live in Gaza. Israel normalized the killing of journalists, of jurists, of medics, of mothers, of fathers, of people who are waiting in queue for a piece of bread, for a little bit of flowers. Israel is the only country that is stand accused of committing genocide, yet the global north, Europe and the United States continue to supply weapons to a country whose prime minister and defense minister actually are wanted criminals, and there's an arrest warrant against them. If we want to have a different future, a future where the Gazification of the global order ends, we need to stand now to Israel, and we need to stop supplying them with weapons. Any country that supplies weapons to a state that is committing genocide is complicit in that genocide. Today, we stand up for what's right, for justice, for legality, for international order, but we stand up also for our collective humanity, for our collective survival. What's happening in Gaza will not end in Gaza and will not stop in Gaza. This is the beginning. This is the beginning of a global order, a new order that is led by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, but also of the Secretary of the NATO, Rutte, who said that attacking Iran is not really illegal. The same guy that who when he was a prime minister said, what can I say so it doesn't appear that Israel committing war crimes? These are the people who are jeopardizing democracy and our national security. Thank you for uniting today, and please continue to fight and fight and fight for our collective survival, for diplomacy, for the rule of law, for humanity, and for justice.
Thank you. Thank you, Rula. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Rudy Kenneth. Please, Rudy. Member of the European Parliament for Belgium. Rudy has a personal history, very powerful, close to the workers and fighting for peace. Rudy, thank you very much for being with us today, and the floor to you.
Comrades, dear friends, it's great to see many of you here, and I thank Giuseppe Conte and the five-star delegation for organizing this event at such short notice. And of course, also thanks to the guests who host us here today. I'm not going to stand on this stage and say that war is bad and that we want peace. I think we know all that, and I think we have to be more clear on that. As member of European Parliament of the left, we need to call out European leaders on a number of shameful choices regarding war and peace. The first shameful choice is in an insane REARM Europe program, which has now been rebranded to a less militaristic Readiness 2030. It's worth 800 billion euros, and it will allow governments to divert towards defense European funds that were meant for development, cohesion, and environmental protection. European governments for years have been asking the EU for flexibility to be able to use EU funds for public spending for healthcare, industry, education, pensions, research, infrastructure, and so on, but were never allowed to be diverted to strengthen our economy for welfare, for high salaries, pensions, education, research, and our crumbling European infrastructure. No, that would have been called state aid, and the EU so far hated this thing. Suddenly, anything is possible now, when the EU can offer an opportunity for defense companies to profit from the mass purchase of military equipment for all member states. The EU is trying to persuade us that REARM Europe is a way to give back jobs to the millions of industrial workers who have lost and are losing their jobs in the automotive or in the steel sector following the mass firings implemented by our very patriotic European companies. But what sort of benefits does investing in defense bring? Unless you plan on regularly use war equipment, then investment in defense is not a healthy investment in our economy. People don't need F-35s, they need cars, trains, and buses. We don't want European states to run on war economies like the United States. We don't want have to find pretexts to wage wars just to sustain our economies like the US do. We want public funding to go to generally productive sectors. We want the EU and our governments to invest in a modern, green industrial policy that creates a strong economy, permanent and well-paid jobs. We want investments in research and education. We want to invest in securing our territory. We want our agriculture sector to be ready to deal with the results of the reckless policies that have ignored science for decades and are now putting our food security at risk. This is the security we should be talking about: having good food, having a good job, having a home. How many homes could we build with 800 billion euros? How many homeless people could we house? How many council houses could we build? How many care homes could we build and make available for our elderly? How many sports facilities, hospitals, schools, and public buildings could we secure because we always gave money to property developers? We always have to sell off our precious public assets and give them to private companies so they can make more profit. But why can't we have our own public infrastructure? We have public efficient and cost-saving energy for transport infrastructure. No, we must oppose this with all our strength. We cannot give into this new militarism ever, but especially when leading this call for rearmament is by somebody like Donald Trump, a man who loves sowing division and inciting hatred at home and abroad. The second shameless policy that I think we need to oppose with all our strength is critical membership of NATO. Enough of this propaganda. NATO is not a defense alliance. NATO is the single most lethal organization in the world. NATO-led imperialist wars have caused millions of deaths in former Yugoslavia, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Pakistan, Libya. Despite what we are told, that NATO is there to protect each other, NATO is there to advance the interests of the United States, not the interests of European ordinary people. NATO membership has dragged us into dozens of unjustified, often illegal, military actions against innocent populations on the basis of proven false information, as in the case of Iraq, where we were misled by war criminals like Tony Blair, or Colin Powell, who lied to the British Parliament and to the United Nations. It has involved us in criminal and violent interference with affairs of other sovereign countries, destabilizing them and destroying their economies and dividing their communities. And right now, in this undemocratic fortress that has been set up in this city, our leaders are deciding, against the wishes of European people, to increase further their military spending to 5% by 2025 to please Mr. Donald Trump. We need to applaud Pedro Sanchez, the only European leader who has refused to agree on this, calling this proposal disproportional, unnecessary, unreasonable, and counterproductive. I agree with Mr. Sanchez, who has shown strong leadership for quite some time. Evidence that when the progressive forces are united, policy can change. I hope that more European leaders will follow this example and respect the will of the people. We do not need NATO. NATO makes us less secure, not more. We should seriously reconsider that what are the benefits for us of being a member of this alliance, and compare this with an alternative project of building security and prosperity cooperation between neighboring European states. Very rarely, military action is a solution to anything, as we see it every day, and it should be the United Nations to lead peacekeeping efforts, as we should push for non-proliferation, certainly for nuclear weapons, for all countries. Weren't Hiroshima and Nagasaki not enough to persuade us? Are we mad? Why can a country have 5,000 nuclear weapons, but others can't have any? It does not make any sense, does it? Why can some countries have military bases and nuclear weapons spread all over the world? Does it make the world more secure? This cannot continue. We need to move forward towards a new world order in which countries engage with each other with respect of each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, and which commercial relationships encourage cooperation and mutual prosperity. We want to have a common European defense system. It's a better idea than NATO, but then states at least can coordinate their military systems without the need of wasting taxpayers' money into weapon systems when our people can buy their bills today. You know who spends the most on defense in the world? Yes, it's the US. And then already the EU. Then there is China, Russia, and Germany on its own. And you know who decreased its defense spending in 2024? It's Iran. Finally, the most shameful choice that the US made is to be the loudspeaker for the US propaganda. All countries who nationalize their national resources and refuse to give them to multinationals are rogue states and diverse sanctions. Violations of human and labor rights are only found in countries who does not align with Washington, London, Brussels' interest. Some genocides has to be condemned, other genocides can be supported, depending on the geopolitical goal. Free trade is only great when it benefits us. When other countries are more successful than us, then we don't like free trade. To conclude, we must have an industrial and foreign policy that benefits the people in Europe, not the lobbies. We need to end neo-colonial practices that hold back the global south. We need to promote peace and diplomacy. We need to uphold human rights always and everywhere. We need to promote a trade policy that benefits all. We need to redefine what security means. We need to focus on the real threats: climate change, food scarcity, extreme weather events. Let's keep pushing for a Europe of peace and prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Rudy. Now we go back to Sumar. It's my pleasure to introduce Jamie Caro. He's a delegate from Sumar, working the head of the cabinet of Yolanda Diaz. Jamie, please. The floor is yours. Jamie is an expert for international relations.
Thank you. Thank you, Giuseppe Conte and Movimento 5 Stelle, on behalf of Sumar and Vice President Yolanda Diaz, with this initiative that is more needed right now in times of war. Around 15 minutes ago, Mr. President Donald Trump said that Spain is going to be a problem because we are not going to fulfill the 5% of NATO. You are welcome, Mr. President Donald Trump, but we like our sovereignty. Okay, as you know, right now in Spain, we have a progressive coalition government between the Socialist Party as majority leader and Sumar, the coalition Sumar. And we can see that we achieved a victory. We have prevented Spain from being dragged into an absurd and a chaotic arms race or REARM, no? We face NATO and we face Donald Trump demands and blackmailing, and we say no, that we are not going to raise our GDP percent of 5% to the budget of defense. Well, it is a precedent-setting agreement, yes, but it's not because of we say no to this kind of REARM plan. It's because we really believe that we can build another model of security for all. A model that is not based of blindly inflating military budget to buy frigates, to buy tanks, and that stuff. This kind of model of defense is on building a real sovereignty, not only for Spain, but an independent and sovereignty in Europe. And this sovereignty has to be more efficient, more coordinated, democratic, and based in a just Europe, in the value of Europe, the social Europe. No, it has been a victory of common sense, or democratic responsibility with our people as well, because the people in the general election voted for this government, and this government is not going to fulfill this REARM plan. No. this government want to advance in social and climate rights, in democratic renewal, and yes, in defense and security, but in the European one, not based in NATO or in whatever Trump desires right now, no? So this agreement is totally absurd, is a sort of obligation, and is totally arbitrary. So we are here saying, like, we want that United States has to respect our sovereignty. But as the previous speaker says, we need more European allies in this. We cannot be the only country to say no to this plan of rearm of NATO. But as you already know as well, we have the European Defense White Paper or the von der Leyen REARM paper that propose something like is really harmful for the countries that they were called in the crisis euro peaks. That is like, well, we can break the rules of deficit if it's only for tanks, but if it is for social affairs or invest in climate change policies, we cannot do that. So this has to tell us one thing: who benefits from all of this? Because some people are going to benefit from this. And let's say it clearly, the US military complex is going to benefit from the von der Leyen plan. Okay, we already know that von der Leyen plan has like some amendments there that say that the plan consists in build sovereignty, autonomy strategy that is to try to reindustrialize Europe with the REARM plan, and it's not about buying more stuff to United States, but we already know that if we are in a race against United States, the budget that is going to, the pocket that these are going to fill is the US military industrial complex. So, as I said, the paper, the Commission Defense White Paper say the worst that can say, like, is on the top of that is like tell us that we can break only the rules if it's for military budget, not for health investment, not for climate emergency policies, not for guaranteed housing, not for guaranteed pension, not for guaranteeing care. But if you spend 1-2 points more of GDP, it's okay, no matter what the defense. I have to. So the real proposition that we have in Sumar is like we have to combine the different 27 budget that we have in Europe, because Europe right now is spending in defense more than Russia. We have to come on this 27 budget. Perhaps if we pull at them, we will have better defense capabilities and even less overall spending. But I'm just finishing. It's not only defense. Defense is not only guns. It's not only tanks. We need a green reindustrialization plan for all Europe, decarbonization that generate decent job. We have to do a massive investment in sovereign digital infrastructure, and I am naming, for example, IRIS-2 satellite program that can fight against the Starlink mass program to have all proper security. And of course, I'm finishing, in a world that we are having presence of war criminals and war crimes in Ukraine, in Iran, and in a genocide before our eyes, or in Palestine, we need to relaunch an international architecture of justice. And only Europe can be the actor that can do that with diplomacy. And we are here in The Hague, and I think that here, right now, there is one name that has to be here, not in this summit, of course, but in the Tribunal of Hague, that is Netanyahu, for his war crimes and genocide.
Thank you. And now I'm pleased to give the floor to Tony Comín. Tony, He is well-known writer, philosopher, and I'm sure that your deep insight, intellectual leadership will enrich our discussion, the issues that we are addressing today. I remember when we met last time in Milan, you came to visit us with your daughter, Laia, correct?
Yeah.
With Laia, and we hope, thank you very much, and we hope really to see you soon in the right place for you, that the European Parliament. The floor to you.
Lasciatemi cominciare in italiano, c'è tanta gente italiana nella sala, grazie Giuseppe, grazie, ma soprattutto non per invitarmi, sino per fare questo appello imprescindibile, necessario, per fare questa chiamata essenziale che facciamo nostra per agire, perché dobbiamo agire insieme nelle istituzioni, nelle strade, anche nel dibattito pubblico, per fare questo che stiamo facendo adesso, che dire no al REARM, sia la pace. And dear friends, apologize for my poor English. So I will, with your authorization, first I will do is a brief speech. I will do my speech in Italian, okay? And after I will translate a part of the speech to English, because like this I assure that at least a part of the room will understand all the speech, okay? If not, ma è breve, è un discorso breve. Ho fatto una negoziazione durissima per fare nelle due lingue perché mi dicevano non abbiamo tempo, Tony, ti domandiamo. Tutti, after I will translate myself. My current translator normally in the meetings is Fabio, because he's a bilingual. Tutti i paesi, tutti i popoli dell'Unione Europea devono ascoltarsi attentivamente a vicenda in questo momento cruciale della nostra storia, perché la sensibilità di uni e gli altri non è esattamente la stessa. E io, che faccio parte di una nazione del sud dell'Unione Europea, che è la Catalogna, una nazione dell'Europa mediterranea, voglio farlo. Allora, gli amici baltici, gli amici polacchi, gli amici ucraini ci avvertono continuamente, da anni fa, no? Che l'Europa non può ricadere ancora una volta nell'errore di Chamberlain. E loro dicono non possiamo firmare nuovi accordi di Monaco, no? La storia è ben nota, eh? A Monaco nel 1938 il ministro degli esteri britannico Neville Chamberlain fece un accordo con Hitler, cedette la parte germanofona della Cecoslovacchia, i Sudetti, in cambio della rinuncia tedesca a ulteriori rivendicazioni territoriali in Europa. Ma dopo gli accordi di Monaco, Hitler continuò la sua espansione territoriale. E ci dicono gli amici del nord, una parte dell'est dell'Europa, ci dicono se oggi cediamo alla Russia, questo non placherà le ambizioni espansionistiche russe, la rafforzerà soltanto. E ci dicono la prossima vittima dell'imperialismo russo sarà un territorio dell'Unione Europea. È un modo di dire il Donbass di ieri, oggi è il Sudete di oggi. Il Donbass è il Sudete di oggi. È un'ironia dell'istoria, perché quella parte dell'Unione Europea che un tempo fa era la più filoatlantica osserva con stupore Trump e gli Stati Uniti adesso flirtare con una soluzione della guerra con l'Ucraina che in molti aspetti a loro gli ricorda la logica degli accordi di Monaco. E si alzano contro questa proposta americana. È veramente una paradossa della storia vedere questa fino a ieri filoatlantica Europa preoccupatissima con la proposta americana, no? Ok, impariamo dall'istoria. Il nostro esempio non è Chamberlain, ma io dico ai cittadini, ai popoli dell'Unione Europea, molto più importante che non ripetere l'errore di Chamberlain è ripetere la saggezza di Keynes. Nel 1919 Keynes pubblicò un libro intitolato Le conseguenze economiche della pace. È diventato un bestseller immediatamente. In esso avvertiva che il capitolo economico del Trattato di Versailles sarebbe fonte di nuovi conflitti in Europa. 20 anni dopo, la storia purtroppo gli ha dato ragione. Fu un bestseller l'anno 19, ma i politici europei ignorarono completamente i suoi avvertimenti. Impariamo dall'esempio di Keynes. Versailles non giustifica il nazismo, evidentemente nulla può giustificare quella mostruosità, ma Versailles è servito a Keynes per prevedere il nazismo. Versailles ha servito a Keynes 20 anni prima per comprendere meglio il perché di quel regime tragico. E da un tempo fa, da tanti anni fa, Jeffrey Sachs, precisamente, come ha fatto Keynes nel suo tempo, ci mette in guardia dai rischi e dai pericoli del Trattato di Versailles contemporaneo e attuale che l'Occidente ha firmato con la Russia per porre fine alla guerra fredda, e Sachs ci invita a chiederci se l'Occidente abbia gestito nel modo giusto la propria vittoria sulla Russia nella guerra fredda. E non dobbiamo ignorare questa domanda. Esaminiamo quali parti della nostra posizione geopolitica alimentano l'imperialismo russo, invece di contenerlo. Esaminiamo quali aspetti della nostra politica estera rafforzano la deriva autoritaria della Russia, invece di spingerla verso la democrazia. La nostra sicurezza non verrà principalmente dal fatto, l'ha detto Fabio prima, di essere meglio armati della Russia, anche perché la Russia ha 5.000 missili nucleari e noi non ne abbiamo neanche 1.000. No? La nostra sicurezza verrà, l'abbiamo detto tutti, dal fatto che la Russia diventi una democrazia che rispetta i diritti umani all'interno, che si impegna pienamente nei principi dei diritti internazionali, del multilateralismo e della Carta delle Nazioni Unite. Ripeto un po' il discorso che abbiamo fatto tutti, me l'avevo già scritto, allora sono contento di vedere che siamo allineati assolutamente. La nostra sicurezza non nasce mai, la sicurezza non è mai nata dalle armi, nasce sempre nel mondo contemporaneo dalla democrazia e del multilateralismo. La sicurezza va di pari passo con il progresso economico e la giustizia sociale. Queste sono le porte della pace. La cooperazione pacifica tra i popoli è la vera garanzia di sicurezza. La dottrina io ho studiato relazioni internazionali e ci spiegavano la dottrina della deterrenza, si dice deterrenza in italiano, vero? Può sembrare molto razionale, no? Ma a seconda di come viene presentata è la trappola più mortale delle storie dell'umanità, perché a prima vista sembra razionale che i paesi abbiano la forza militare necessaria per garantire che non vengano attaccati. Ma quando si armano per deterrenza, gli altri paesi ne possono percepire questo come una minaccia. Poi anche loro, volendo difendersi, sentiranno allora il bisogno di armarsi ancora di più. Così si scatena in nome della deterrenza una corsa agli armamenti. Finisco. Nel tentativo di garantire la nostra sicurezza, con questa dottrina della deterrenza otteniamo solo un mondo sempre più pieno di armi e quindi un mondo più pericoloso. No, la dottrina della deterrenza non può diventare la giustificazione per un'escalation globale degli armamenti. Eppure è proprio questo quello che sta succedendo adesso. Questo è il punto in cui ci troviamo oggi. La deterrenza senza diplomazia non ha senso. La deterrenza senza uno sforzo multilaterale verso il disarmo non ha senso. La deterrenza senza il rafforzamento dei trattati internazionali sulla non proliferazione non ha senso. Non proliferazione nucleare e non nucleare. Contro una dottrina della deterrenza che serve a legittimare la corsa agli armamenti, dobbiamo sostenere una dottrina in cui la deterrenza sia solo il rovescio della medaglia di un progetto globale di disarmo, di cooperazione e di primato della diplomazia, come ci ha detto in un modo brillante come sempre il professore Sachs.
Grazie Tony.
Faccio una piccola traduzione all'inglese,
No,
forse per una parte del...
No, I wanted to say exactly that. That is really a pity that for some very few of you who did not understand Italian, because you confirm what you are, a great writer, a great philosopher, a great talker. Thank you very much.
I have the text in English.
But we will give them.
I can.
We will give them. Thank you.
I can
Thank
give you
Thank
in
you.
English. Okay.
I will immediately send the message of another colleague at the European Parliament, Marc Botenga from the PTB, Belgium. Please send the message. Mark Botenga. No.
Dear friends, dear comrades, thank you for the opportunity to address this important counter summit, because what's going on today is absolutely critical for the future of Europe. NATO, and mainly Donald Trump, want to force us to increase defense spending, so-called defense spending, to 5% of GDP. In reality, this is not about defense. I mean, look at the numbers. We already outspend with NATO, Russia, by 8 times. We spend 4 times more on military affairs than the Chinese do. So why should we outspend Russia by 20 times? You know, even without the United States, European countries have a lot more fighter jets, twice as many fighter jets, 3 times more tanks, 4 times more boats, like fighting ships, frigates and stuff. So we have a lot more material. We spend a lot more than the Russians. Why should we go to 5% of our GDP? Even the United States don't spend 5% of the GDP. You know who does? Israel. But then they attack almost all countries in the region. To us, the economists in Belgium were very clear, and they said this is going to mean that Belgian families will lose 6,000 euros a year to war. Now, this is unacceptable. We cannot afford this. We need investments in social security. We need investments in education. We need investments in infrastructure, in hospitals. The situation in most European countries is dire, socially and economically. So we need to invest this in welfare. We need to invest this in a productive economy, in our steel sector, our car sector, all of these economic sectors that today are suffering. In other words, our choice is social security, not warfare. Stop this militarization. We refuse this march towards a third world war. Thank you very much.
And now, Ligue Barroso, please, if you can come. Ligue is the president of the Dutch Socialist Party. So, Ligue, really, once more again, thank you very much for your kind hospitality. Thank you very much for your wonderful collaboration, splendid support for organizing with us this event. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I think you can hear me. I will keep it quite short, I think. As maybe the last speaker or almost last, this is nice, I think, for you. We are the many, and on behalf of the Socialist Party of the Netherlands, I am so grateful for everybody of you to be here today on the day of the NATO summit, where those world leaders are spending billions on warfare. We gather here to give peace a voice. And our voice of peace is not naive. Although for them the truth is probably somewhat inconvenient, we have all the facts on our side. This 5% Trump norm, and we've seen the text already he got from Rutte, so it is a Trump norm, for all European NATO members will make an arms race and uncontrollable violence more probable. But there's also some things certain. It will certainly lead to unacceptable decrease of our social security, our healthcare, and our education. Europe does already have an enormous amount of weaponry and soon will spend more than all countries in the world together. And the simple truth is, NATO wants to be an alliance for power and an alliance for force. They don't want to be an alliance for collective peace, for safety, or for justice. However, the decisions made at the summit today are not by any means democratic of nature. They are just big words about percentages that have no follow-up in parliaments yet. So no self-respecting leader can follow through with these giant budget cuts on national level, not without resistance. And we have seen this resistance already. 150,000 people here in Den Hague stood up against the killing of citizens in Gaza, as happens all over the world. Hundreds of thousands of people in Rome protested for peace and against REARM Europe, as did people in Brussels, in London, in Paris, and many, many more big cities in Europe. And yes, people in the streets, they are really worried. They are even scared about the aggression of governments of superpowers. And yes, we all worry about our safety, our society, and the world that will be left behind for our children. But more and more of us see how acts of hostility could be ended at a negotiation table and not at war. And all working class people feel that these billions for armory can never be at the expense of human needs, of healthcare, of education. And more of us get involved. So many of our young people see how a future welfare can only take shape with reason and with real system changes. So unlike these participants of the NATO summit today, for us, today is a start, and it's not a final piece. A start of calling in democratic rights and expanding our voice of peace. And we can succeed because we are the many. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We are really time constrained, so we cannot go ahead. I want to thank you, all of you, for being here today. And I want to say thank you in particular to the video, to the people who sent some video and we couldn't show. One is the colleague from MEP from Sumar, Estrella Galan. Then we have from Slovakia, Branislav Ondrus. Then Miranda Paz from Spain, from Greece. She sent from Spain, from Green Party. She sent a message as well. And then we have economists such as Giovanni Dossi, who sent a video as well. And then we have Walter Bayer, the president of the European Left. Chris Edge, Prize Pulitzer last year. Giorgio from Hague, Cyprus. Demirel from Linke Party in Germany. All those people send a message and I couldn't show, but we are going to make something bigger out of this, so there will be a follow-up. So thank you very much for being here, all of you. Now I will give the floor for last word to Giuseppe Conte, and then we are going to make a photo action all together if you have a 1 minute patient, and if the Dutch Parliament allow us still 1 minute more. Thank you very much. Giuseppe, the floor is yours.
Just a few words. We fixed today 2 steps. One goal is the European Union, the Parliament, the European Parliament decided to appeal the plan of REARM because it is without a legal basis. This is very important for our struggle. And the second is that the discussion was very productive today, and we also have signed a final declaration that is also open to other signatures. And of course, this discussion, this path, and this political and legal struggle has to go on, cannot stop now. The path is very long. The struggle will be very hard. We have to continue to work in the same direction, in the same shared vision. That's why, in this spirit, I want to invite you to meet you in Rome after the summer. Rome, where the European Union was born in 1957, the very idea of Europe was founded to prevent, is important to remember, the rearmament of nation states and to ensure lasting peace on our continent after the Second World War. Today's leaders, they are subscribing a different vision, a different idea, and we want the funding promises in order to have to continue the same original vision of Europe. Let us come together once more. We have the opportunity to work together. Now we are the minority, we are the opposition inside the European institutions, but outside, I'm sure we stand with our citizens, and the citizens are with us because what they want is clear: peace, prosperity, functional healthcare, education, safe transport, investment in innovation, support for vulnerable people. And we are the ones who will save the Europe in this moment. So courage, and all together, let's work. See you in Rome. Bye-bye.